Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into Chapter 3 of our source material. And honestly, it's a completely wild ride. We're looking at the 1979 crisis. This was a dramatic turning point in American economic history, a moment that basically rewrote the entire rulebook on how money works in the US. We're talking about a story of soaring prices, wildly risky banking, and a totally shocking economic break slam. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. You're 33 years old. That was Thomas Hoyning's age when he witnessed a banking crisis that was so intense, it became permanently etched in his memory. It literally shaped his entire career at the Federal Reserve. As a young bank examiner out in the Midwest, he essentially had a front row ticket to an economic roller coaster that was, well, about to fly completely off the rails. So that brings us to the big question we're unpacking today. What actually happens when a long, drawn-out period of inflation comes to a sudden, completely unexpected stop? I want you to just keep that in the back of your mind as we go, because understanding the sheer massive momentum of this inflation buildup, that's exactly what makes the sudden stop so unbelievably devastating. Just to give you an idea of how insanely fast things were moving, by 1979, inflation had surged to a staggering 10.7% a year. Now, for the average person, this wasn't just some abstract economic theory tucked away in a textbook. No way. They felt it every single day. It was right there, staring them in the face at the grocery store, at the gas pump. Everyone knew it was happening. Companies were practically scrambling to hand out huge pay raises just so their employees could actually survive the skyrocketing cost of everyday living. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the absolute biggest danger, it wasn't actually at the supermarket. It was hiding inside the bank vault. While consumer prices were going through the roof, the Fed wasn't just inflating the cost of your groceries, it was pumping up the prices of assets. And an asset is, well, pretty much anything a person can buy. This secondary, sneaky form of inflation, asset inflation, was exactly the thing setting off massive alarm bells for bank examiners like Thomas Honig. Let's break down what we're talking about here. What exactly was ballooning in value? Well, farmland across the Midwest was shooting straight up. Same with commercial real estate and, incredibly, even oil wells and drilling rigs. Now, you might be wondering, why does that matter? Well, because these specific items were being used as collateral sitting right there on bank balance sheets. Their artificially inflated values made banks feel totally bulletproof. It encouraged them to hand out these incredibly aggressive, super risky short-term loans. The bankers basically thought, hey, property values are climbing so fast, we'll just refinance the loan the second the building is finished. But here's the catch. High inflation combined with relatively low interest rates totally broke the math of saving money. It actually punished you for saving, because any tiny bit of interest you earned on a standard savings account was completely wiped out by inflation. So to just survive and try to earn any kind of real return, banks and investors basically felt forced into a corner. They had to push way out on the risk curve. They were desperate to find something, literally anything, that paid out well, which marched them straight into those highly speculative, crazy loans we were just talking about. But as we all know, you can't drive a car at top speed toward a cliff forever. Eventually, you run out of road. By early 1979, that 10.7% inflation rate was just tearing the economy apart. Enter Paul Volcker, the newly appointed chairman of the Fed. Volcker took one look at the situation and saw the sheer terrifying danger of what was brewing. On October 6, 1979, he holds this pivotal press conference, and Volcker decides, right then and there, it is time to step in and absolutely slam the brakes on the money supply. The Federal Reserve started rolling out some unbelievably harsh, painful measures to fight the soaring inflation. So, the crucial point is, this was not some gentle easing off the gas pedal. This was a brutal, sudden stop. Squeezing the inflation out of the entire system meant immediately halting that rapid rise of those asset prices. The farmland, the commercial buildings, the oil rigs, all of it. Remember all those aggressive bank loans built on the fantasy that prices would just climb forever? Well, suddenly the music stopped. The collateral just stopped gaining value overnight. And it sent this massive, traumatic economic shockwave straight through the beating heart of the banking system. Which really brings us face to face with the brutal reality of the aftermath. Listen to this.
You have this enormous collapse, failure upon failure, loss upon loss, crisis upon crisis.
That's Thomas Honig speaking. In 1981, right in the thick of this agonizing sudden stop, he was actually promoted to vice president of the Kansas City Fed's Supervision Department. Suddenly, he's overseeing a team of 50 bank examiners. He wasn't sitting in a tower crunching theoretical numbers. He was literally watching the dominoes fall on bank balance sheets in real time. It was a frontline lesson about the sheer power and the absolute danger of Federal Reserve policy. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive shift in central banking philosophy that would completely define the coming decades. Look at the contrast. On one side, you have the Volcker era, totally defined by administering those harsh, incredibly painful medicines required to kill inflation and cool down the speculative frenzy. But then, transition over to the Greenspan era, and the dynamic completely flips upside down. You see officials like Poole and even Honeck himself, at times, voting alongside Alan Greenspan to cut rates. The primary weapon of the Fed shifted from restricting the money supply to relying on easier money and constant rate cuts. So, we started all of this by asking what happens when inflation suddenly stops. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with an even bigger, totally provocative question. What happens to an entire economy when its central bank completely flips its primary weapon? Think about it. When the one institution responsible for the value of our money pivots from strictly fighting inflation to utilizing rate cuts to manage the system, the 1979 crisis absolutely shows us the devastating fallout of asset bubbles bursting, but it also perfectly sets the stage for everything that comes next in modern economic history. Makes you want to keep exploring, right?